Hello and welcome to this video series from Hoordoo Scenics. My name is Victor and this is part 2 out of 3 of a series on how to build this Goblin cave for RPG. Part 2 covers how to paint the cave and how to build the cliffs. Painting rocks is one of my favorite activities. For the base color I'm going to use a dark gray. The color is called Asphalt. And if you want to see more details about how I'm doing this and you want to understand why certain methods are applied, check out my rock painting tutorial here on YouTube. The goal of this step is really to cover all that white. Make sure you use a very dark gray and just cover it as best as you can. Use water to get in those hard to reach areas, and at the end there should be almost no white left. I'm also trying here to blend the cave entrance and make it look like it's part of the bigger cave. For the next step I'm using a lighter gray than the base one and some yellow. We're going to use a sponge, and using it we're going to apply some of that gray on top of the rocks that we've painted before. We're going to mix also some gray with yellow and do the same thing, apply it on top of the rocks. If you want more details, check out that rock painting tutorial that I have here on YouTube. Once the color dries out, we're going to use an even lighter gray, but this time apply less than before to highlight those rocks and make them look more realistic. Once the paint is dry, we're going to use some white for dry brushing. That will help all those edges from different rocks stand out. A black wash will help those rocks stand out and all those low areas will become more visible. This is a cave behind a waterfall. Any rock that stands in water or is exposed to water will have green stuff on it, so we're gonna use some green to simulate that and make those rocks look a bit more realistic. Also, we're going to use some gray to simulate dust and mud and basically anything that you might see on a rock that's been sitting there forever behind the waterfall. Now that the sides and the ceiling of the cave are done, it's time to glue it in place and build the bottom part. Here I've tried a technique that I'm not sure that I like. I tried putting glue into soil that I'm going to use as the base. I think I should have put in a bit of water, but it was kind of hard to do it and I would not recommend it. I do recommend building the bottom part and the soil before you attach the sides. It would be very hard otherwise to get in all those crevices. However, at the end you still have to do a bit of work to cover those little green areas that are still visible between the rocks and the soil. This we are kind of done with the cave. We still have those rocks to paint, but we're gonna do it a bit later. In the beginning of this video series I mentioned that I forgot to cut some foam. This is the part that I forgot. It was the top of the cave where the water will flow. I forgot that we actually have a river there and you need some sides for that river. The foam cutter helps here to get some smooth edges and some smooth transitions between the top part of the cave and the sides. With the cave done and everything glued together, it's time to start putting rocks on the outside. I'm going to use again rocks that I've made with molds, and just like before with the inside of the cave, I'm going to attach individual rocks and then using plaster I'm gonna blend everything together. Unfortunately, I realized too late that the camera was not straight for this part of the video, so I couldn't fix it. I'm sorry about that. But what we're doing here is building a bit of wall on that left side so we can have the cliff not be perfectly flat. After finishing that left wall and straightening the camera, it's time to build the front side of the model. We're going to attach rocks and make sure that everything looks good. I decided to build a river base before going with rocks. I thought it would be easier to blend everything together this way. Just like before, plaster cloth is what you should use. It allows you to really cover those areas that you've made with little pieces of foam, and it gives a smooth transition between different surfaces. Before placing rocks on the front side, I've decided to also cover the top part with some plaster cloth, and for the first time this diorama is starting to look realistic. It kind of has that real feel. Until now it was just pieces of foam put together. I'm also using a bit of paper to create some hills on the top, because I don't think it should be that flat. Usually you don't find that flat surface in the real world. At the end of the river where the waterfall will be, we're gonna place a big rock for now, and then we're going to cut it later in the shape that we want. Once everything is covered with plaster cloth, we're gonna do the same trick as before: vinegar and some plaster. We're gonna start covering all those areas that are still green, and we want to also smoothen any areas that look weird. Now that the base layer is complete, we're gonna attach rocks using Loctite power grab. Just like before, the way we've done it for the cave, we're gonna repeat the process here. You can use this plaster mixture, or you can use some sculptor mold to create the shape of the riverbed. In this case I'm just using plaster and making sure it doesn't look that smooth or that straight when it transitions from land to water. I'm not sure if you were able to notice in this sped up video, but a few times I had rocks falling off after I glued them. You might have to use a bit more glue sometimes, and if something falls off, it's not a big deal. We're just gonna cover that area with a bit of plaster. For the final time in this diorama, we're going to use a plaster mix with vinegar, and we're going to smoothen the transitions between those rocks that we've placed before. Sometimes reaching areas with a wooden spatula or a plastic spatula is kind of hard. I found that using my finger with a bit of water really allows me to smoothen all those surfaces and create that nice texture. Cutting the brink of the waterfall was a very messy step. I've decided not to record it and actually did it outside. Before applying paint, I've used a pick to create a few strata layers on those rocks and remove any imperfections. Painting the outside of the cave is the same process as painting the inside. We're going to use a dark layer for the base, and then we're going to build more layers with paint on top that are lighter color. For anything that will be covered with soil, I like to create a brown base. I usually use some cheap paint because it will be covered anyway by soil, but it helps with hiding that white and making sure that if I miss any spots, the white will not be visible. The riverbed will also be covered in brown, and on top of that I'll put some soil. Once the paint is dry, I'm going to apply some Mod Podge, and on top of that Mod Podge I'm going to sprinkle soil that I got from outside. If you use soil from outside, make sure you bake it for about an hour, otherwise it might get moldy as time passes. To glue the soil in place, I'm spraying the entire surface with rubbing alcohol, and then I'm applying a mixture of glue and water. I usually use a 3:1 ratio of water and glue. I prefer this gluing technique over the previous one where I mixed glue in the soil. I find it much easier, and I think the results are better. I totally forgot about those rocks in the cave, so it's time to paint them now. I should have done it earlier. Once the rocks are painted, I'm going to use a mix of different browns to color that soil to make it look more uneven. There's no particular technique here, I'm just applying patches of brown on top of each other, hoping to get something that looks realistic. Finally, we're going to paint those rocks in the riverbed at the top of that diorama. For the terrain that's underwater, I like to apply a bit of blue on top. That will make the water look deeper, and it will give that feeling of reflection. I'm using here a marine blue, and I'm kind of randomly applying it over different areas. Just like inside the cave, for the outside rocks we're going to apply different shades of gray on top, some yellow, some whites, and then finally we're gonna go with grays and browns over. Dry brushing is just amazing for highlighting edges and any sharp areas of rocks. For those rocks that are underwater or exposed to a lot of water, we're going to apply some green. If you look at a real river, you're going to notice that those rocks touching the water will have a green tint on them.